Hello everybody, welcome back to the Vinyl Junkie Record Shop. My name is Mike, and today I'm going to do a special video. I've been wanting to do this for a while, but time has gotten in the way a little bit. I recently reached 200 subscribers. I'm just a few over that now. So to celebrate 200 mark, I came up with the idea of a 200 theme, and my idea was to show two back-to-back albums that are 100% burners, 100% killer, 100% kick-ass, however you want to define them, but they have to be two back-to-back albums from the same band, and I thought it would be a neat idea to show off some of my collection and show off some killer albums. I could have drawn from an entire wealth of artists, and I'm sure if those of you watching are going to have a couple of your own favorites that aren't on here. There are some glaring favorites that I have omitted simply because everybody talks about them, and I've included a few classics that I just feel like, for one, I wanted to get out some of my classic original albums and show some of them. But you know, I didn't put anything in here from Metallica. There's no Kiss. You know, I mean, I could have done that, but you know, those bands, they're pretty much their entire discography for the most part are all pretty killer. So I'm just going to show some of these. Some of these you're going to be familiar with. I've got a few surprises in here that, you know, we don't see a lot or we kind of forget about. So I think this will be fun. So two back-to-back 100% killer albums. Let's get started. I think one of the obvious choices, we have to go with this one. This, of course, is AC/DC Back in Black from 1980. I always have to stop and think if it was from 80 or 81. 80. Just a killer album. I think this album really kind of defined what heavy metal would be, hard rock and heavy metal would sound like going into the 80s. Groundbreaking album, especially, you know, from a band who was on the brink of disaster after losing the beloved Bon Scott, their front man. They get Brian Johnson and they come out and they just drop one of the all-time great hard rock heavy metal classics in Back in Black. Tremendous, tremendous album. And of course, they followed that up with For Those About to Rock. I think this is a great album. It's probably my second favorite of the Brian Johnson era. And I actually like this even maybe a little bit more than at least a couple of the Bon Scott era albums. But just a great, great album. Songs like For Those About to Rock, the title track, Evil Walks, COD, Let's Put the Finger on You, Let's Get It Up. I mean, there's just so many great songs on this record too, and a great follow-up to an album that would be, you know, very difficult to follow up when you've released something as landmark and groundbreaking and spectacular as Back in Black. Great job on the follow-up For Those About to Rock. Okay. Had to include my favorite metal band of all time and my favorite metal album of all time. We're going to start with Iron Maiden's Power Slave. I argue that this is one of, if not the greatest heavy metal albums ever released. It's my personal choice for favorite. And it's just a matter of taste. I love this album. I think Iron Maiden was at the top of their game and they were hitting on all cylinders. And I think that this is just a perfectly written, played, produced heavy metal album. It's got everything that you could possibly want, and it's absolutely spectacular. It stood the test of time. And it was followed up by what I think is one of Iron Maiden's, you know, other heavier albums. I think these are the two heaviest Iron Maiden albums, but this is Somewhere in Time. Just another fantastic, brilliant album. They really hit the mark for heaviness on this one. I think this might actually be the heaviest Iron Maiden album as far as the totality of the songs on here. And it would also be, I think, the last super heavy album. As with Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, they started to get a little more of an actual progressive sound. But these two Iron Maiden albums were absolutely killer. Also, too, we're talking about albums that often go hand in hand as you know, albums that are taken, two albums that are taken together as a whole. They just have a natural feeling of sequence to one another, and you can't do that without doing these classic Judas Priest albums. The first one, Screaming for Vengeance. This is one of the first metal albums that I remember really getting into. and it's just an all-time classic with the awesome artwork. And then you follow that up with Defenders of the Faith. Again, these two albums they did just kind of naturally go hand in hand. But two great albums by Judas Priest. And then we've had to do some Slayer. We're going to start with Hell Awaits. Oh man, this is just, this was the heaviest thing that I had ever heard. When did this come out? 85? Yeah, we had Metallica, I had heard Venom, Motorhead. Thrash was kind of really in its infancy. But when I brought this album home, it looked so evil and heavy, and the opening salvo of Hell Awaits. That song pretty much defined what I would enjoy most about thrash metal, and it was that opening, plotting, mid-paced riff in Hell Awaits that gives way to the full speed attack sound. I just fell in love with that mid-paced, heavy riffing style. And that's my favorite aspect or part or ingredient of thrash metal. And this album this was the heaviest thing that I remember ever listening to. It scared me back in the day, to be honest. And then naturally to follow that up with Rain and Blood, teaming up with Rick Rubin of Def Jam Records. There was a lot of speculation that was a bad idea, but I mean, they came up with arguably the greatest thrash metal album of all time, the standard bearer for what thrash would be. This album just comes in, kicks your ass, gets out in very little time. But I mean, Angel of Death to open an album, maybe the greatest heavy metal, thrash opener of all time. And again, you want to talk about that mid-paced, bang your head, moshing riffing. The middle, the break in Angel of Death, it just goes unmatched. I mean, that's the standard bearer right there. So, two great back-to-back albums from Slayer. And then we have to include these, again, in the 80s. We talked about AC/DC setting kind of the bar. How about Black Sabbath rebounding from the firing of Ozzy Osbourne and recruiting of Ronnie James Dio, unleashing heaven and hell upon us. What a fantastic album. Not only was this a great 80s metal album, I think you could argue that this is Black Sabbath's greatest album. I could put it at number 2. I think I'd have to put Paranoid up there just because of its overall influence and the great songs on it. But I could make an argument that Heaven and Hell is the greatest Black Sabbath album. Such a fantastic record. And then to follow that up with Mob Rules. This is not the original copy. This is the only one of 2 albums I'm going to show that aren't original copies. This is the reissue of Mob Rules. Just picked this up last year. I had never had this when it came out. But the two Dio albums, or the 2 Dio Black Sabbath albums, are arguably 2 of the best Black Sabbath albums and 2 of the best heavy metal albums ever recorded. And then Dio would take what he had done from these 2 records and go on and have an amazing solo career with his own band. And then of some of the more, favorites, I want to show this one. This is, you might not know from all the metal stuff that you see in the background, but my favorite band of all time is this band, and these are the albums that I think really broke them big. They had fantastic records before, but these are the 2 big ones. I'm talking about Styx, and this is The Grand Illusion from 1977. One of the first Styx songs I remember hearing was Come Sail Away, and I fell in love with that song when I heard it on the radio, and I just thought it was a great band, and this great album. And they followed that up with Pieces of 8, and some of the heaviest or hardest rocking Styx songs can be found on this album. Actually, between the 2 albums, you could really have a greatest hits collection of the band between these 2 records. But Pieces of 8 just had it all with such a great lead-off track and The Great White Hope. That's some really awesome hard rock. If you think Styx is just kind of one of those syrupy balladry bands because you remember things like Babe and Best of Times and things like that, man, if you've really not listened to Styx, give these 2 albums a try. And you'll listen to things like Great White Hope and Blue Collar Man, and the title track Queen of, or not the title track, but Queen of Spades, which was, I think, the closest thing that Styx ever came to heavy metal. And then Renegade. I mean, just great songs on these two albums. Two fantastic albums that back to back are just absolutely killer. Okay, so those are some of the most well known. A lot of these are going to be well known too, but these are kind of maybe a lesser tier than some of those classics. Most of you know, if you've watched the other videos on my channel, that I love Southern rock, and one of my favorite bands of all time is this band from Jacksonville, Florida, Molly Hatchet. One of the most iconic album covers ever, but this is just a great debut album. Bounty Hunter, Gator Country, Dreams I'll Never See, be the cover version of the Allman Brothers Band, was the biggest hit off of this album. But just introduced that really killer triple guitar attack that was really would be unrelenting in other albums. Danny Joe Brown, great voice, great front man, very original sounding. And I think that this band, specifically on the next one I'm going to show you, had more of a harder rocking edge than Leonard Skinner, the Allman Brothers, and some of the other developing Southern rock bands. But this one here, one of my all-time favorite albums. This is probably, definitely in my top 10 all-time favorite albums. Might be in my top 5. Love this album. Never get tired of it. This is Flirting with Disaster. Again, I remember hearing that song on the radio and thinking it's just such a great song. And to this day, it's one of my favorite all-time songs. Love this album from top to bottom. Just got some great material on it. Whiskey Man, great way to start the album. Jukin City, Boogie No More. Talk about that triple guitar attack. Gunsmoke, one of the deeper cuts on this album, is one of my favorite Molly Hatchet songs. And then the title track, Flirting with Disaster. Great albums, 10 out of a 10 album. One of the greatest rock albums of all time. One of my favorites. Those two together, back to back, kick your ass, 100%. Two back to back, 100% kick your ass. Okay, just dug these out at the last minute as I was going through my collection. I thought I probably could do these because these were the only two albums that this band released. Bit of a super group. It was combined by Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, Paul Rodgers, Bad Company, Tony Franklin, and Chris Slade, who has made some appearances in all kinds of different bands. He played in Uriah Heep for a couple of records, played in AC/DC. But this is The Firm, the solo album, the debut solo album. Some really great tracks on here. Closer, Make or Break, Radioactive was the radio hit. Midnight Moonlight is a great tune. Satisfaction Guaranteed. This is just a really awesome album with the guitar playing of Jimmy Page and the soulful vocals of Paul Rodgers. Really awesome album. Kind of forgotten. No one really talks about that a lot. Followed up by Mean Business, which had some other killer tunes on it. Fortune Hunter, the opening track, All the King's Horses, Tear Down the Walls. I think the debut was a little bit better of an album, but these two albums together, really great albums, and the only two that the band would release. If you never checked out The Firm, give them a listen. Funny side note, we used to, you go to record stores where they would sell tickets to concerts, and this was, we'd see people camped out for, the night before to buy concert tickets, and thought that was a crazy thing to do. But my concert buddy from back in the day, the first time we ever went and camped overnight to get concert tickets were just to see The Firm, and we ended up getting in the 8th row. So that was pretty cool. Okay. Another one of my favorite rock bands, and I think they're really underrated, but these two albums are spectacular. I could have gone on the first end of this album, because I think that was maybe the band's greatest record, but I wanted to show these two just because I like these albums and I like the album covers. We're going to start with Triumph, Never Surrender. Again, this is another one of the first hard rock albums I remember having, back in my youth. And I remember putting this album on and playing the title track, Too Much Thinking. I just thought that was so awesome. Such a great, deep cut from Triumph with fantastic guitar playing and vocals from Gilmore, the drummer. This is just a great album, top to bottom. The title track, Never Surrender, is killer. When the Lights Go Down, absolute killer hard song. And they followed that up with Thunder 7, another great album cover. Those are great album covers. But this was just a really awesome album too. Spellbound being my favorite track off of it. Yeah, Rock Out, Roll On, Cool Down, Follow Your Heart was the big radio hit. Underrated band in Triumph. Two killer albums back to back. All right, let's go to the Wayback Machine. This may be the oldest that I'm going to show you. How about this one? Demons and Wizards from Uriah Heep. I've been on a Uriah Heep kick here lately, and I plan on showing some more Uriah Heep. But this was just an awesome album. Kind of, very influential on the world of heavy metal that would come after that. And then also iconic for the Roger Dean cover art. But this has great a cohesive sound to it. I could have gone with the album before this too. Look at Yourself, that had some great heavy tunes on it, but I think the band really hit their stride with this release because this album just sounds, it's not, I mean, you could call it a concept album. I don't think it really is, but it has that cohesiveness to it. With The Wizard, great opener, kind of mellow, but majestic and still heavy, being not a heavy song. Traveler in Time, great prototype for early power metal. Easy Living, the big cut off of this. Circle of Hands, Rainbow Demon, and the closing Paradise, The Spell. Just a great album from a great band, underrated in the history of rock. And they followed that up with another iconic album cover with The Magician's Birthday. Great album. The title track, The Magician's Birthday, is one of my favorite Uriah Heep songs. It's got such an incendiary guitar solo from Mick Box, who is the most underrated rocker in all of rock, who is still rocking. Mick Box from Uriah Heep. If you don't know these guys or don't know Uriah Heep, check them out. Just a great album. Sunrise, great opener. Spider Woman, great song. Echoes in the Dark. Rain, a beautiful song written by Ken Hensley. Sweet Lorraine opens up side 2. Was a minor hit for the band. And then again, the highlight for me is the title track, The Magician's Birthday. Two great back-to-back killer albums from a killer band. All right, early 80s American power metal. Let's start with this one, Malice, In the Beginning. I've talked about Malice a lot in some of my metal videos. These guys, looked the look, had a really great sound. This album is very kind of Judas Priestish. If there's one knock to it, sounds a lot like a Judas Priest album. But I mean, how can a metal band not really sound like Judas Priest? But yeah, really one of the early U.S. power metal albums in Malice, In the Beginning. And they followed that up with just a killer record, License to Kill. This one sounded a little bit more original. They kind of fell into a more unique sound for themselves. Another great album cover, photos on the back. But the title track, License to Kill, one of the better metal songs in the early 80s. So I've always looked at these two albums as a really great combination of awesome metal. All right, let's go to another one. An underrated thrash band. Now, this band put a few albums out, kind of traditional power metal sounding, and then on this record, they went more in the thrash vein, and they would release two spectacular, what I think are classic American thrash metal albums. This is Know Your Enemy by Laws Rocket, an underrated thrash band. Great album, great photo on the back there. But this one, Last Breath, what a great song that is. Hiroshima, Self-Destruct, great songs. They stepped up their sound and the heaviness level on this album to I think kind of compete more with what was going on at that. It was the mid to late 80s thrash explosion, and I don't know if they felt like they needed to do that to survive, or they just wanted to play that kind of music. But they hit a nice 2 or 3 RBI double on that album. Hit the home run here, grand slam home run with this one. This is Annihilation Principle. This is a repress. This is only the second of non-original albums I got to show. Absolutely love this album. This is one of my all-time favorite thrash albums. Criminally underrated. So great from top to finish. Laws Rocket, Annihilation Principle. If you've never heard of them and you like thrash, do yourself a favor, check them out. All right, let's keep it going here. How about this one? Crocus, One Vice at a Time. Oh man, this had Long Stick Goes Boom on it. Ragdoll, Bad Boys, Ragdolls, Playing the Outlaw. Cover of American Woman. Crocus, underrated, one of the underrated hard rock bands of the 80s. And followed that up with Headhunter. Fantastic album. Fantastic with the title track, Headhunter. Eat the Rich, Screaming in the Night, Stayed Awake All Night. One of the more underrated hard rock bands out of the 80s. All right, let's do this one. How about King Diamond's Abigail? One of the greatest all-time metal albums. This goes in my top 5, I think, metal albums. The greatest metal concept album. First solo album from King Diamond after leaving Merciful Fate, and brought along a couple of the guys from the band. This was just absolutely, it is still amazing. It's aged well. Absolute killer concept album. Follow that up with the amazing Them. Some musician changes on there. I don't know if you can see it really well, but that's autographed. Met King at a local Karma record store in Indianapolis before a gig at the Arlington Theater back in the day. And this is just another killer album. Not quite, I don't think it's quite as stellar as Abigail, but still absolute killer. These two King Diamond records. All right, yeah, how about this one? How about a band from Canada that gets criminally underrated too? How about Helix? This is No Rest for the Wicked. Love this album. Love this band. Great songs on here. Does a Fool Ever Learn? Let's All Do It Tonight. Heavy Metal Love. No Rest for the Wicked, the title track. Don't Get Mad, Get Even. Dirty Dog. This is just a great, great hard rock album from top to bottom. Always love that album cover too. And they followed that up with Walking the Razor's Edge. This was a great one too. Had the Rock You, the killer title track. Animal House, Young and Reckless, Gimme Gimme Good Lovin', and as a shout out to one of the other classic YouTubers out there, Darcy, Six Strings, Nine Lives. This album bears the song that gives that title to him. So shout out to you, Darcy. You'll like these two picks, and Helix, No Rest for the Wicked, and Walking the Razor's Edge. Two fantastic 80s metal albums. Okay, let's do two of the most iconic, you could argue, two of, and one, maybe call it the best, I don't know, but new wave of British heavy metal albums. Let's do this one, Def Leppard, On Through the Night. It just, fantastic introduction to this band. Rock Brigade, Hello America, those are great. A great 1-2 punch to open this album up. But a really great album to show what the band was capable of doing. And they released, I think, maybe their finest album after that with High and Dry. This is one of the greatest metal albums also, in my opinion, to come out. Kind of on par with, if you've not, you don't listen to a lot of Tigers of Pantang, check them out. I think these two bands had kind of a similar style. But just a great album. Another opening 1-2 punch in Let It Go, and another hit and run. Two of my favorite metal songs, my favorite Def Leppard songs. Absolute great album. You can see in the background, I've got Pyromania there. I considered it just because I think it was one of those great 80s metal albums because it had the polish and the edge, and it was a little more polished than these two albums. But I wanted to show these two because of they featured Pete Willis on guitar, who would just leave this world too early. But what a great guitar duo, and Steve Clark and Pete Willis. These two albums are amazing. They got some great stuff on them. And let's close this one out with a couple of the originators. Let's go back, way in the back days to early metal. And let's go with another Canadian band. How about Anvil with their debut, Hard and Heavy? Yeah, this has got some... It was a little rough around the edges, not quite as refined, but some of the silly lyrics behind, like School Love and AC/DC, but some furious heavy metal that we come to be introduced to by this great band Anvil, and they followed it up with, again, I think one of the more underappreciated metal classics, Metal on Metal. Now, metal fans will will hail this as one of the great metal albums, but still underrated. But this album was just amazing. Pound for pound, I'd put this up against any other metal album by any other metal band out there. Metal on Metal, the title track, Mothra. I think that might be my favorite song off this album. 666, Heat Sink, The March of the Crabs, Jackhammer. Just a great, great album. But two awesome back-to-back albums from an underappreciated band who's still going today. Probably thanks to the biography or the documentary Anvil, the story of Anvil. So, okay, this one just under 30 minutes. I like that. Wanted to do it kind of quickly. Wanted to show, again, for my 200 subscribers, reaching 200 subscribers, two back-to-back albums that are 100% killer, bangers, kick-ass, just great back-to-back albums from bands. Again, there are more I could have shown. There's a whole lot of them out there. In the comments, drop a couple of your favorites if I missed some that you would like to have seen on here or thought you might see. If you're new to my channel, thanks for stopping by. Help me out. Hit like, hit subscribe. I'm going to try to shoot for 300. Got a long way to go, but got to keep building, keep building. For those of you that come to the shop frequently, I appreciate it. And I thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.